As we dive into the story of the Battle of Gettysburg, I'll reveal 10 details that often go unnoticed but are crucial for understanding what really happened. And later in the video, I'll share the incredible story of the only civilian casualty at Gettysburg. The Civil War is going poorly for Lincoln and the North. They have more men, money, and supplies, but still they seem to lose battle after battle because they're poorly led by incompetent generals. Lincoln is so frustrated with his generals that when a brigadier general and 58 horses are captured by the Confederates, Lincoln appears to regret the capture of the horses more than the generals. It is the summer of 1863. Lee's Army of Virginia has recently won another battle at the place called Chancellorsville. It is a costly victory in that his right-hand man, Stonewall Jackson, is killed by friendly fire. But the North is devastated by the Battle of Chancellorsville too, where a Union force that outnumbered the South 2-1 still suffered twice the casualties. Upon hearing the news of Chancellorsville, a distraught Lincoln is beyond consolation, moaning, my God, what will the country say? What will the country say?" And then fled the room weeping. Those about him fear Lincoln might mentally collapse or even kill himself. Lee has decided to venture into the North. He hopes a victory in the North will break their spirits, as there is growing talk among Northerners that they should just let the South have their own country and end the war. Another motive for Lee to take the war to the North is he hopes to reduce the stress in Vicksburg, a vital city on the Mississippi. Finally, Lee needs supplies, especially shoes. Here's where it gets interesting. Were shoes really a reason for the accidental Battle of Gettysburg? After all, Lee desired to avoid a general engagement until he had a chance to pick the location to commence the battle. Some have argued that the shoe story is a myth, not mentioned until 14 years after the battle by General Heath, who claimed he sent Pettigrew there to find shoes. The argument goes there were no shoe factories in Gettysburg, and that Jubal Early had brought his cavalry through Gettysburg on an earlier date and demanded a ransom of 1,500 shoes, but he rode away empty-handed. Hence, there was no motivation to go to Gettysburg for shoes. Some historians argued the shoe story was simply a cover for why the brilliant Lee allowed his men to blunder into an unintended battle at Gettysburg. Also, the Confederate defeat doesn't sound as bad if most of your men are shoeless. It conjures up images of Washington's shoeless men crossing the Delaware, and it implies Lee's men had to overcome horrific logistical problems. But just because General Heath didn't write about shoes as a reason for the accidental battle until 14 years later, it doesn't mean it wasn't true. The reality is, it's not uncommon for soldiers to wait 1 or 2 decades after a war to write their memoirs. It is clear that the Confederates were trying to seize supplies wherever they went. As a matter of fact, just days before the Battle of Gettysburg, the South took needed supplies from the nearby town of York, requisitioning flour, sugar, bacon, and yes, even 2,000 pairs of shoes and boots. Well, whatever the case, many historians believe that the two armies simply ran into each other at Gettysburg because the roads all converged on that spot. The movie Gettysburg begins with Confederate General James Longstreet receiving intel that the Union Army is moving north towards Gettysburg.
What do you got? I got the position of the Yankee Army, only a few miles down the road.
At the same time, Union General John Buford's cavalry arrives in Gettysburg. He recognizes the town's strategic importance and prepares for battle.
You know what's gonna happen here in the morning?
Sir.
Old damn rebel army's gonna be here. They'll move through this town, occupy these hills on the other side, and our people get here, Lee will have the high ground, and there'll be the devil to pay.
Buford quickly assesses the terrain, realizing that the Confederates could use the high ground around Gettysburg to their advantage. He knows that if Lee's forces seize those ridges, the Union will be in a vulnerable position. Buford makes the bold decision to hold the ground, delaying the Confederate advance until reinforcements arrive. As dawn breaks on day 1 of Gettysburg, July 1st, the two armies bump into each other outside of the town. Lee's cavalry commander, Jeb Stuart, is in New Jersey and not available to inform Lee that the Union Army is nearby. Led by General Buford and General Reynolds, the Union Army at first looks to be winning. However, the Confederate reinforcements under General Richard Ewell arrive and outflank the Union Army. The Confederates chased the Union forces through the town of Gettysburg, and house-to-house fighting ensues. During the intense engagement, General Reynolds, one of the North's best generals, is shot through the neck by a Confederate sharpshooter and dies. The fighting is so fierce that many staff officers have between 1 and 3 horses shot out from under them. Eventually, the Union Army is pushed back through town and takes up a position on the high grounds of Cemetery Ridge. The forces of the North eventually form a fishhook with Culp's Hill and Cemetery Ridge to the north and Little Round Top and Big Round Top to the south. Ironically, many weary Union soldiers will sleep among the tombs found on Cemetery Ridge, a place many of these soldiers will sadly take up eternal residence in the coming days. One thing often overlooked is that the first day is no small contest. Over 50,000 troops are engaged and roughly 16,000 soldiers are killed. The first day alone will rank in the top 20 bloodiest days of the Civil War. Heightening the importance of this day is Ewell's failure to take the high ground. Lee's gentlemanly request that Ewell press these people, a request the recently slain Stonewall Jackson would have known meant attack, went unanswered by Ewell, who felt his men were too spent from the day's fighting. Would the more vigorous Jackson, who famously raised his arms before battle, mimicking the biblical Joshua of old, have taken the high ground and carried the day, and quite possibly won the war? We will never know, and can only speculate what ran through Lee's mind as he saw the Union Army take the high ground with all its military advantages. What we do know is that General Buford's decisive action to fight and hold the high ground clearly saved the day for the Union forces.
We know what you did this morning. That was one hell of a piece of soldiering.
Thank you, sir.
For some men, the day was not over. One such man was Union soldier James Winchell, badly wounded in the arm. Unlike the South, the North typically provided soldiers with chloroform before amputating an arm or a leg. But for Winchell, none was to be found. Winchell told the doc to go ahead, even waving off the need to hold his legs down. The doctor was so impressed with the young man's courage, he told his assistant, "He's pretty spunky. Let's make a good job of it." And they did, with the brave Winchell heroically enduring the amputation without any painkiller. Day 2, July 2nd, begins. Confederate General James Longstreet encourages Lee not to attack the Union positions because they hold too strong a position.
This is almost perfect. Now we got them where we want them. Let's move south and east down the road, get between them and Lincoln, find some good high ground, and then they'll have to hit us. They'll have to. Then we have them, General.
Lee responds,
"But if need is there tomorrow, I cannot move this army away. No, sir, I will attack him."
well, Lee actually says, "I'm going to whip them or they're going to whip me." General Lee, confident after pushing the Union back on day 1, plans a bold offensive. Lee orders a pincer attack or an attack on both ends of the Union fishhook at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Longstreet will attack on the right with the 1st Corps. Ewell's people on the left will demonstrate to keep the enemy from reinforcing against our right flank.
Lee orders them to advance at their leisure. Southern gentlemen do not give direct orders. Once more, Stonewall would have known that meant attack now, but he is dead. Ewell feels the enemy is too strong, and he waits for Longstreet. Longstreet argues away the day, saying how foolish an attack would be, and argues Lee never gave him a direct order to attack. On the Union side, General George Meade's forces have established a strong defensive position along Cemetery Ridge, stretching from Culp's Hill to Little Round Top. Despite the early morning quiet, the Union command quickly realizes Lee's intentions. One of the key moments comes when Colonel Joshua Chamberlain and the 20th Maine are ordered to hold the far left flank of the Union line on Little Round Top.
Put your colors here and set your regiment to the left of this line.
This small hill became a critical point in the battle, as losing it would allow the Confederates to roll up the entire Union line. Finally, at noon, Longstreet attacks. He fights through a peach orchard, a wheat field, and a rocky place at the foot of Little Round Top called the Devil's Den. His men then charge Little Round Top, hoping to outflank the Union Army. The 20th Maine, commanded by former college professor Colonel Joshua Chamberlain, holds off repeated charges by Longstreet's men who almost break through. What makes this feat all the more amazing is that many of Chamberlain's men are mutineers who have been assigned to him because they are from Maine. In the end, all but a handful will fight bravely at Gettysburg.
No man will call me a coward.
Chamberlain, almost out of bullets, orders his men to counterattack the Confederate charge with their own bayonet charge, even picking up rocks and throwing them at the rebels. It works. Little Round Top and the left flank are saved. The movie captures Chamberlain's final charge on Little Round Top with incredible intensity. It's a scene that powerfully captures the courage and resolve of ordinary men facing impossible odds, making it one of the most stirring moments in the film. But why did a bayonet charge work? How could 80-some men drive back thousands? The most likely explanation is the Confederates had to believe that Chamberlain would never have countercharged with his bayonets had he not been reinforced. So the rebels falsely concluded that the charge was merely the tip of a larger force coming their way, and he retreated before what they perceived to be a large force of Union soldiers.
Colonel, we watch from our position above. It's the damnedest thing I ever saw. May I shake your hand, sir?
Chamberlain's bravery and daring were not the only story of note on day 2. General Daniel Sickles, who before the war famously killed his wife's lover and used the then novel plea of insanity to get off, made the day unnecessarily exciting by exceeding General Meade's orders to protect the left flank and Little Round Top. Instead of remaining in place, he overextended his forces and moved them into the Peach Orchard, allowing his 3rd Corps to be overrun. In the process, Sickles lost his leg, a leg he proudly donated to the Army Medical Museum in Washington, D.C. Fortunately for the Union Army, the Confederates were unable to take advantage of Sickles' blunder. But one man came close, General William Barksdale, leading his Mississippians in an amazingly brave charge, an assault often overshadowed by Pickett's charge, almost carried the day against the 3rd Corps in the Peach Orchard. But the brave soldiers from Minnesota stood in the gap and held the line. Before the action was over, 50% of Barksdale's men were killed or wounded, and Barksdale himself suffered mortal wounds. Barksdale's last words were, "I am killed. Tell my wife and children that I died fighting at my post." On the other end of the fishhook, Ewell finally attacks in the late afternoon and is turned back at Culp's Hill after tough hand-to-hand combat. Johnny Culp's family owned this hill. He had gone to the south to fight for the Confederates and joined Stonewall Jackson's brigade, now commanded by Ewell. Some historians claim Johnny was killed in the Confederate attack a mere 20 yards from his family farm. Others claim it was on another location of the battlefield. Whatever the case, Johnny's death so near his home was ironic and had to be doubly heartbreaking for his family. One more unknown story from the second day of Gettysburg is that news reached Lincoln that his wife had been thrown from a carriage while visiting wounded soldiers and had suffered a serious head trauma. Lincoln rushed to her side. It is quite possible that the carriage was sabotaged, with someone hoping loosened bolts might lead to a catastrophe for Mr. Lincoln. The indomitable Miss Lincoln refused to rest, and she insisted on helping with the preparations for the 4th of July, a day they did not know yet whether it would be spent in celebration or in the trenches. The sun rises on the 3rd day of the Battle of Gettysburg, July 3rd. Lee decides that since the attack on the flanks have failed, he will order Longstreet's attack on the Union center. Longstreet begs Lee to retreat and fight another day.
Sir, any attack we make will be uphill over open ground.
Lee says no. The enemy is there, and I am going to strike him.
No, sir. Retreat is no longer an option.
Longstreet will remain angry at Lee for the duration of the war and beyond. He was formerly one of Lee's best friends. On a personal note, Longstreet had lost 3 children to fever several months earlier. His anguish during this period had to be near unbearable. Regardless of his opinion, Longstreet is a soldier under authority and orders some 13,000 to 17,000 men to advance up Cemetery Ridge and what will become known as Pickett's Charge. An unknown piece of Gettysburg history is that General George Pickett, whom Pickett's Charge is named after, was commissioned as an officer by Abraham Lincoln before the war. They're actually good friends, and Pickett will not allow anyone to speak ill of Lincoln in his presence.
We will use all the artillery. They will center on that point right there.
To soften the Union lines, the Confederates ordered a 2-hour bombardment. This Confederate artillery fire was the largest concentrated artillery attack in history up to that point. Samuel Wilkinson, sitting next to his dead son, described the horror of the bombardment by the Confederates on the Union position before Pickett's charge. In a moment, the air was full of the most complete artillery to an infantry battle that was ever exhibited. Through the midst of the storm of screaming and exploding shells, an ambulance driven by its frenzied conductor at full speed presented to all of us the marvelous spectacle of a horse going rapidly on 3 legs, a hinder one having been shot off at the hock.
General Longstreet, should I commence the attack?
Given his orders, Pickett turns to his fellow Virginians and orders them,
Up and to your posts! And let no man forget today that you are from Old Virginia!
This was no small request, as Pickett's men would have to traverse a mile-wide expanse and march into the teeth of Union artillery and Union soldiers firing down on them from behind a stone wall. Perhaps Pickett's men had courage because the band played lively polka music behind them. I'm not really sure why that was the music of choice. The North and the South exchanged artillery fire. The artillery Pickett's men faced was devastating. As the Confederates advanced, they faced solid shot which might cut a man in 2, then bounce high and take off the next man's head, or bounce low and take off the next man's legs, leaving a wake of dismembered men. Pickett's men also would have faced hollow, lit shells, which upon exploding dispersed deadly shrapnel, sometimes killing up to 10 men and even terrifyingly vaporizing some advancing soldiers. Finally, canisters containing lead balls and metal were fired, copying the pattern of a large shotgun, only with amplified and more deadly effect were used. The movie accurately captures that it was common for men gripped with fear to load cartridges on top of cartridges.
Some of them, they load and load. They never fire. They just keep right on loading. Some of them come home with 7, 8 bullets rammed up in the barrel. Never fired a shot.
When the battle was over, one gun was found with 23 unfired cartridges in it. One historian even claimed that over 6,000 rifles were found to have anywhere from 3 to 10 loaded rounds still in them at the end of the battle. Pickett's men almost broke through the Union lines. The Union forces, reinforced at the critical moment, closed the breach. Pickett's decimated charge disintegrates, and they were forced to fall back. General Armistead, with hat on sword, bravely commanded his men as a key leader of Pickett's charge, and his efforts are considered by many to be the high water mark of the Confederacy. The movie does accurately portray Armistead's sorrow in leading a charge against his good friend, General Hancock, epitomize the horror of the Civil War that prompted brother to kill brother and friend to kill friend. Upon his death, Armistead left his watch and other possessions to Hancock. Thousands of Confederate soldiers are dead, wounded, or captured. Lee, seeing the devastation, rides out to meet the survivors and takes full responsibility for the defeat, riding up to them saying,
It is all my fault. Hear me. Hear me, I pray you.
In A.L. Long's memoirs of Robert E. Lee, a Union veteran of the bloody last day at Gettysburg, provides a startling account of Lee's response. I had been a most bitter anti-South man and fought and cursed the Confederates desperately. The last day of the fight, I was badly wounded, and as General Lee ordered his retreat, he and his officers rode near me. I raised up my hands, looked Lee in the face, and shouted as loud as I could, "Hurrah for the Union!" The general heard me, looked, stopped his horse, dismounted, and came forward to me. I confess that at first I thought he meant to kill me, but as he came up, he looked down at me with such a sad expression upon his face that all fear left me. He extended his hand to me, and grasping mine firmly and looking right into my eyes, he said, "My son, I hope you will soon be well." If I live to be 1,000 years, I shall never forget the expression on General Lee's face. There he was, defeated, retiring from a field that cost him and his cause almost their last. Yet he stopped to say words like those to a wounded soldier of the opposition who had taunted him as he passed by. Lee's army, battered and exhausted, begins its retreat back to Virginia. Gettysburg was the largest battle ever fought in North America, with over 50,000 casualties. It was the turning point of the Civil War, because the South would never again threaten the North in such a powerful way. But it would go on for 2 more bloody years. Combined with the defeat at Vicksburg, the North could truly celebrate the 4th of July with the knowledge that the Confederacy was deeply weakened. Nevertheless, Lincoln mourned Meade's failure to follow up their great victory at Gettysburg by engaging and defeating the retreating General Lee. Adding to Lincoln's sorrows, just days after the Battle of Gettysburg, there were draft riots in New York that had to be put down by armed force. Men who had recently fought in Gettysburg had to be moved down to New York to quell the riot, which led to the deaths of over 500 people. And yet, Lincoln still appreciated the magnitude of this triumph and was convinced that the Union victory at Gettysburg was the result of prayer and God's divine intervention. He shared his conclusion with the recovering and now one-legged General Daniel Sickles. I went into my room one day and locked the door, and I got down on my knees before Almighty God, and I prayed to Him mightily for victory at Gettysburg. And I then and there made a solemn vow to Almighty God that if He would stand by our boys at Gettysburg, I would stand by Him. And He did, and I will. Now let me tell you the wild story of the only female casualty of the Battle of Gettysburg. As fighting rages through the town on July 1st, 1863, Jenny Wade, a 20-year-old seamstress, flees with her family to her sister's brick house for safety. Her sister has just given birth, and Jenny takes on the responsibility of caring for her, while also helping Union soldiers by filling canteens and baking bread. On July 2nd, as the battle intensifies, a shell crashes through the roof of the house, narrowly missing Jenny's family. Undeterred, she and her mother continue their efforts, preparing dough for the next day to bake more bread for Union soldiers. The morning of July 3rd brings more gunfire, and Confederate sharpshooters target homes in the area. Despite the danger, Jenny returns to the kitchen to knead the dough, believing the thick brick walls will protect her. Tragically, a stray bullet pierces 2 doors, striking Jenny in the back and killing her instantly. Her death becomes a poignant symbol of the civilian cost of war. Just 9 days later, Jenny's fiancé, Corporal Jack Skelly, fighting in Virginia, also loses his life, sealing their love story in eternal tragedy. But wait, our half-baked love story doesn't end here on this sad note. For on the afternoon of July 4th, the day after the Battle of Gettysburg, Jenny's mother, ever practical, bakes 15 loaves of bread from the dough Jenny was kneading the day she was shot. And thus, the South may never rise again, but Jenny's bread sure did. So the question is, where am I going to place the movie Gettysburg on our leadership board? I'm going to place it in 2nd place, behind Patton. And the reason for that is Patton, the cinematography, the acting, the music, they're just such a powerful combination. Gettysburg, the acting is so-so, but what I like about Gettysburg is it just gives you a tremendous overview of that battle, unlike any other movie I think I've ever seen.